My name is Catherine Stone, and I'm 40 years old. I work as a doctor at a hospital. Today is the wedding of my only family member, my younger sister, Megan. It's a joyous occasion, but I can't wholeheartedly celebrate it. That's because Megan's groom is my ex-husband, Richard. In other words, Megan and Richard were having an affair. Megan achieved this happiness by stealing Richard away from me. Normally, who would send a wedding invitation to the person they stole their partner from? But this must be Megan's way of asserting her dominance. When I think about it, it's almost endearing how poorly thought out it is. Megan is a little silly, shallow, and capable of doing something as outrageous as having an affair, but she's still my only family. Today, at this wedding, I've decided to completely cut ties with both Megan and Richard. During the wedding, which seemed far more extravagant than mine had been, Megan took the microphone. It was the moment when the bride and groom thanked their families, and I'm sure everyone in the venue was expecting her to deliver a heartfelt speech. However, what Megan announced with such confidence were words filled with utter insult aimed at me.
Today, my dear sister is also here with us. She's my one and only family. But my sister is still single. Oh, to be precise, she's divorced. To elaborate, she's a poor soul who ended up divorced because I took her husband away from her. My sister, even at her age, hasn't managed to hold down a proper job. She's barely getting by working part-time as a janitor. What a failure. And on top of that, it's her fault that our parents passed away. She's such a failure, a walking disaster, and a 40-year-old spinster, but is there anyone here in this venue willing to take her? Of course, free of charge. There's no need to spend a dime on someone like her. Oh, and she doesn't even need to have the fancy position of being someone's wife. Just use her as a helper around the house or something. It'd be convenient for you and would probably ease her worries about the future. Having a sister like this is the biggest stain on my life.
Megan went on and on, throwing insults at me. Naturally, the guests were completely taken aback. Even Richard, sitting next to Megan, had gone pale, but Megan didn't seem to notice at all. I was astonished. Why would she ruin her own important wedding like this? If she wanted to vent her dissatisfaction or hurl insults at me, she could have done it behind the scenes, away from all these eyes.
Hey, sis, why don't you say something? I went out of my way to introduce you to everyone. Here, take the mic. You've got to promote yourself, after all.
Dragging her wedding dress behind her, Megan came all the way to my seat and handed me the microphone. Her face was plastered with a crude, smug grin. Now, what should I do? As I pondered, I twirled the microphone in my hand.
Well, in that case, may I have a moment?
What?
Suddenly, someone spoke to me. It was an older man, impeccably dressed in a suit. Megan looked dumbfounded, clearly not expecting anyone to actually approach me. All eyes in the room quickly turned toward us. The man gently took the microphone from my hand and spoke in a calm, steady voice.
Catherine Stone, I've heard a lot about you. Although we've never spoken directly, my cousin was treated at your hospital and seems to have been in your care.
Could you mean that woman who was discharged last month? Now that you mention it, I think she said she had a cousin who was an executive at a well-known company.
That's correct. I'm glad you remember. Though I must admit, hearing her mention my title as an executive always feels a little embarrassing. She told me all about what an exceptional doctor you are, so much so that I've practically heard it on repeat. She had been so withdrawn due to her illness, but ever since her discharge, she's been an entirely new person, full of energy. And I believe it's all thanks to you, Dr. Stone.
I mean, I was just doing what any doctor would do.
And how many people in this world can truly do what you consider ordinary? Just hearing about you has naturally drawn me toward you. I've spent my whole life focused on work, and I'm nearly a decade older than you, but would you consider dating me with marriage in mind?
He knelt at my feet and spoke his heartfelt words of love with utmost sincerity. Suddenly, cheers of a "oh my gosh" erupted throughout the venue. As I stood there bewildered, more and more hands reached out to snatch the microphone from him.
Hey, that's not fair, old man. I've been interested in her way before you. You can't just take advantage of the situation like this.
Exactly. I never imagined I'd get a chance to approach her like this. Well, Catherine, I'm the youngest guy here, and I also happen to work as a government official.
Hey, stop cutting in line. Youth isn't a status that lasts forever, you know. If we're talking compatibility, I'm the same age as Catherine, and I'm great at housework and have a stable job.
Oh, please. You're swamped with running your company. Meanwhile, I've built my wealth through stocks and investments, so I'm home most of the time and can be there for her the longest. She'll never feel lonely with me. Catherine, forget dating with marriage in mind. Let's just get married right now. I promise you won't regret it.
Well, what is this? Did I just suddenly hit a popularity peak? I was surrounded by a group of handsome men. It's a wedding, so of course they're dressed to the nines, but they were genuinely good looking with great physiques. All of them were guests from the groom's side, and their features vaguely resembled Richard's. Megan, seemingly unable to process the sudden attention her sister was getting due to her own words, stood frozen in shock. Just then, a loud voice rang out. Wait a second. The man approaching was someone I recognized. Richard's older brother, Tom Yarbrough.
What's wrong with all of you? Can't you see you're making Catherine uncomfortable? Proposing out of the blue at a place like this. What are you all doing? Acting so immaturely.
Oh, finally stepping up, Tom. Took you long enough. Everyone was waiting for you to make your move.
What? Are you kidding me, Uncle? I thought you came over to smooth things out, but you're the one proposing out of nowhere.
Well, how could I pass up this opportunity? It's true that Dr. Stone helped my cousin. And today, after seeing her, I found her incredibly charming. I can't stand the thought of this being the last time we meet. When there's a chance, why not take it? Unlike you, that is.
What? Don't just spout selfish nonsense. You don't even know how I feel. I've been in love with Catherine since the first time we met. I've been thinking about her far longer than any of you have. There's no way I'm letting anyone else outdo me in my feelings for her.
What? Tom's declaration left me wide-eyed in shock. Seeing my expression, he realized his slip and looked panicked.
Well, Catherine, about what I just said, I mean,
Tom, is what you just said true?
well, yes, it is. I've always had feelings for you, Catherine. I still do.
At Tom's words, the men surrounding me looked like they'd been waiting for him to admit it all along. No way. Since when? Do you really mean since the first time we met?
Yes, from the moment we met at the hospital. It was love at first sight for me. Later, when Richard brought you to our family as his fiancée, I was completely stunned. If I'd been more assertive, maybe it would have been me by your side instead of him. But that's just wishful thinking. Instead, I distanced myself from you, trying to suppress my feelings. Saying I was putting my feelings aside out of respect for you and Richard sounds noble. But the truth is, I was just scared of facing reality.
I see. Now that you mention it, you did become a bit distant all of a sudden. At the time, I thought I might have done something wrong. Or maybe you felt awkward about working with someone who was about to become part of your family.
I was just being a coward. And while I was hesitating, Richard went and committed such an unforgivable betrayal. To cheat on you, no less, with your own sister. I wanted to comfort you when I thought about how hurt you must have been. But approaching you then felt like I'd be taking advantage of your vulnerability, and I hated the idea.
He looked at me with eyes full of resolve.
I've been thinking like that this whole time. And even now, with everyone watching, when you're being mocked and hurt so deeply, I couldn't be the first to stand up and protect you. I kept weighing everything against my own self-preservation. Everyone knew how I felt and put on this little act, didn't they?
Tom glanced around at the men standing nearby.
Well, not all of it was an act. I'd say about half of it was genuine. Dr. Stone is, after all, a very attractive woman.
Yeah, it's just that, Tom, you weren't stepping up anytime soon. We figured Catherine would just feel stuck dealing with a coward like you.
We thought maybe it'd be quicker if all of us just stepped in to make her happy.
All right, I get it now, loud and clear. Thanks for lighting a fire under me.
Tom shouted, sounding utterly exasperated. So, all those proposals and advances were just an act to provoke Tom, who had been thinking about me all along, into finally taking action. If anything, I felt relieved. I had been wondering what on earth I'd do if I'd suddenly become this popular out of nowhere.
Catherine Stone, please allow me to express my feelings again. I've always had feelings for you. That feeling has never wavered. In fact, it's even stronger now than it was before. As a fellow doctor, I've always deeply respected you. I'm 5 years older than you, and I understand there may be concerns, especially when it comes to work. But my feelings for you are second to none. So, if it's all right with you, would you consider dating me with marriage in mind?
Tom. I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Tom, kneeling and waiting for my answer, looked just like a prince, and I couldn't help but feel a flutter of excitement, despite my age. Everyone in the venue was holding their breath, waiting to see how I would respond. At this point, it was no exaggeration to say that Tom and I had become the center of attention in the room.
Wait just a minute. What do you think you're doing getting everyone all excited?
Of course, Megan, the supposed star of the day, wasn't about to stay silent, even if this situation was of her own making. With her face bright red, Megan stormed over, snatched the microphone from Tom's hand, and smashed it onto the floor, breaking it.
Someone's actually proposing. Are you kidding me right now? Now everyone's focused on you too. This is my wedding. I'm the only star of the show.
Megan, after all the stirring up you did, what are you even saying now?
Exactly. Right now, I'm waiting for Catherine's answer. Please don't interrupt us.
As Tom spoke, shouts of, "Yeah, that's right," and "Don't interrupt," erupted, making it feel less like a wedding and more like a rowdy gathering. Megan's face turned so red it looked like she might explode, and she stomped her feet in frustration, her wedding dress swishing dramatically.
Shut up. Be quiet. I'm the one who invited all of you. My sister was supposed to be utterly crushed by seeing how happy I am. She's been acting so unbothered the whole time. That's why I wanted to make sure everyone here at the wedding knew what a burden she is.
Crushed, really? I've already given up on a lot when it comes to you. Honestly, I wasn't even planning to attend today.
What? It's my wedding. Your one and only sister's wedding. Not attending would have been unthinkable.
Well, you are my only family, that's true. But have you forgotten all the things you've done to me? You've always been like this, always mocking me, looking down on me, stepping all over me, and now even stealing my husband. Though, honestly, maybe it's for the best. You're the one stuck with the kind of guy who'd have an affair with his wife's sister. As I spoke, I thought to myself, this is it. This will be the last time. This moment was the turning point for me to cut ties with my sister. So I decided to lay it all out. No regrets, no holding back. Say everything I needed to say before walking away for good.
What are you even saying? You're such an idiot, Catherine. You're still living off part-time jobs, aren't you? You're useless everywhere you go, and even as a wife, you couldn't do your job properly. That's why you got cheated on. Richard couldn't stop complaining about you. You barely worked, neglected things at home, and used work as an excuse to ignore him. You didn't provide any comfort or support.
Hey, Megan, what are you saying?
What? It's the truth, isn't it? Richard, you said it yourself. You told me I was so much better than her. You said that even with your demanding job as a lawyer, thinking of me gave you the strength to keep going. That it wasn't my sister you wanted by your side, but me. You chose me over her.
Megan boldly continued to expose the details of their affair. Richard's face grew increasingly pale.
What's yours is mine anyway, isn't it? You're supposed to take care of me forever. It's your fault Mom and Dad died. You took our parents away from me, so you'll always be my slave.
Oh, so you're aware that you've been taken care of? Well, I suppose I have been looking after you in various ways. You've been living off Dad and Mom's insurance, and when the money ran low, I worked part-time tirelessly to make ends meet. You went to vocational school with the money I earned, didn't you? I paid for your tuition and your living expenses. I'm glad to see you haven't forgotten that.
Well, but that money was dirty anyway. It was money you earned from some grimy janitor job, wasn't it? You weren't even working a proper full-time job to provide for me, so don't get cocky.
What are you even saying? If that's the case, then everyone in this world would be using dirty money, wouldn't they? Even a janitor's job is an essential and respectable one, making sure people can live and work comfortably. You might want to refrain from making comments that belittle specific jobs. It only shows how little you understand your place.
Just shut up. You're the one getting all worked up. Is it because I hit a nerve?
Excuse me, I couldn't help but notice something. Tom interjected, raising his hand to speak. Yes, Tom, what is it?
Thank you. I was just wondering, does your sister not know that you're a doctor, Catherine?
What?
Oops, Tom beat me to it. I had been fine letting Megan stay under her misconception, but
What are you talking about? My sister, a doctor? There's no way that's true. My sister is an idiot. There's no way someone like her could ever become a doctor.
No, she really is a bona fide doctor. Didn't you hear what that gentleman said earlier? He mentioned that his cousin had been under Catherine's care as her doctor.
Yeah, I think he said something like that, but no way. My sister once bragged about working at a hospital, but that could mean anything, like a part-time job at the hospital, right? There's no way she's actually a doctor.
Tom, it's pointless. She only sees and hears what suits her narrative. For her, the idea of me being a doctor is simply inconvenient. After all, she dropped out of vocational school and is now working as a temp. while the sister she's been looking down on is a doctor at a prestigious hospital. There's no way she'd willingly accept something that would hurt her pride like that. As I spoke calmly, Megan's face, which I thought couldn't possibly get any redder, turned an even deeper shade of crimson.
What? Lies, all lies. You're all just trying to trick me, aren't you? That has to be it. Even Richard said so. He told me that my sister has always been working part-time as a janitor. He said he wanted her to become a stay-at-home wife, but she absolutely refused to quit that job for some reason.
Oh, is that so, Richard? I glanced over at Richard. All eyes in the room shifted toward him. Unable to bear the pressure, Richard staggered toward me and Megan, then bowed his head in apology.
I'm sorry. I lied to you. I only told you bad things about Catherine, like saying she was stuck in a lousy part-time job or that she never did any housework.
What? Richard? What are you even saying?
Well, I just assumed she knew. I mean, they're sisters. How could Megan not know her own sister is a doctor? Not to mention, even though Catherine paid for her tuition and supported her, Megan never appreciated any of it and just kept bad-mouthing her. And I just went along with it.
I see. I figured as much. So even though you had an affair, you still didn't know what my job actually was. Or maybe it's because you had an affair that you refused to see the truth.
No way. So my sister really is a doctor?
That's right. I've been saying that this whole time, haven't I? Even after all this, you still can't believe it. Luckily, I've always loved studying, and becoming a doctor has been my dream since I was a child. I took out student loans to cover my tuition and devoted myself completely to my studies. Why did you ever think I was stupid?
Well, it's because whenever I asked you about Dad and Mom's inheritance, you always said, I don't know, or I'm not really sure. I figured there must have been some inheritance that I was supposed to get. But because you're so stupid, you couldn't manage it properly, and I thought it must have been taken by relatives or someone else.
Sigh. The inheritance has been properly managed by a professional. You only ever brought it up when you wanted something for yourself, didn't you? I explained that this inheritance was meant to be saved for emergencies, but it seemed like you didn't want to hear that. So I decided to just stick with I don't know or am not sure. Once I started saying that, you finally began to give up. I never imagined that would lead you to think I was stupid, though.
No way.
At that moment, Tom suddenly shot a sharp glare at Richard.
The reason you kept bad-mouthing Catherine, isn't it because you felt inferior to her? You were aiming to become a doctor yourself, weren't you?
Tom,
You kept retaking entrance exams, only to eventually give up on becoming a doctor. And then you decided to aim for law instead. Honestly, I think it's impressive that you actually became a lawyer. That's something our whole family is proud of. But you always made comments comparing yourself as a lawyer to me and our relatives who are doctors. So when you chose Catherine, a doctor, as your partner, I couldn't help but wonder what was going on. And after seeing your behavior and listening to your sister's words, I became certain. You tried to confine Catherine, a doctor, to the role of your wife, telling yourself, being a doctor isn't such a big deal. It's something even I can control. Isn't that how you wanted to see things? Instead of choosing the path of overcoming and conquering your inferiority complex, you chose to tear others down and look down on them instead. That very choice is the epitome of being consumed by a complex.
At Tom's words, Richard's face kept shifting between pale and flushed, clearly struggling to keep his composure. His inferiority complex had been exposed in front of everyone. He must be feeling so humiliated that he'd want to crawl into a hole and disappear. In fact, the murmurs in the venue had shifted almost entirely to criticizing Richard. So the affair was because of his inferiority complex toward his wife. No way, that's unbelievable. He's acting like a child. He's a lawyer, yet all he could think about was tearing someone else down. How immature. And the same criticism was directed at Megan as well.
No way, my sister is really a doctor. Meanwhile, I'm a temp worker, getting bullied by full-timers, and I only managed to quit when I got married. And yet,
Megan muttered to herself while biting her nails. When I tried to say something, she glared at me sharply before I could speak.
I'll never accept that you're a doctor. You took Dad and Mom's lives. How can someone who drove their own parents to their deaths even dare to call themselves a doctor? Are you out of your mind?
Maybe it's time I told you the truth about that too. I thought I was protecting you by keeping it from you, but there's no need for me to hold back anymore.
What? What are you talking about?
Hey, Megan, in your memory, why do you think Dad and Mom passed away?
Well, it's because, when we were kids, you insisted on wanting a different cake for Christmas. And even though it had started snowing, they drove out in the car. I stayed home that day, but their car was hit by a truck that skidded on the icy road, and Dad and Mom died, right? You were injured but survived. That's why
Actually, it was the other way around. That day, it was you, Megan, who insisted on something and begged Dad and Mom.
What?
Megan, your birthday is on Christmas, isn't it? That's why you insisted on wanting a second cake. So Dad and Mom and you drove through the snow to the bakery to get it. And on the way back home, after safely buying the cake, you were in an accident. Dad and Mom died instantly, but you survived, even though you were seriously injured. When I visited you in the hospital, you suddenly started crying and said, "It's all my sister's fault that Dad and Mom died." I remember being so shocked, wondering what had happened.
That's a lie.
No, this is the truth. It was you, Megan, who insisted on having your way, and it was Dad, Mom, and you who were in the accident.
Then what were you doing at that time?
I was hospitalized with severe pneumonia at the time, so I wasn't even home, and I received the news of the accident while I was in the hospital. Besides, even if what you're saying were true, do you realize how old I was back then? Our parents would never have left a young child alone at home to go buy a cake. They weren't that irresponsible.
That's a lie. It has to be a lie. Then if you weren't home, there's no way you could know why they left the house.
That's because, while you were still in the hospital after the accident, I overheard you muttering in your sleep. You kept repeating, "I'm sorry for asking for cake," and "I'm sorry, it's my fault." Plus, they found a completely crushed but unmistakably fancy Christmas cake in the car you were in. So there's little doubt about what happened.
So, it was my fault.
Megan began trembling uncontrollably. Even as I watched her in shock, my heart no longer wavered. All the efforts I had made to protect her feelings had only served to enable her foolish behavior. I thought I had said everything I needed to, but there was still more. Oh, by the way, changing the subject, it's great that you're having such an extravagant wedding, but your alimony payments to me have been seriously overdue.
Well, that is.
What? You're talking about money in a situation like this. I can't believe it. How greedy can you be?
Yes, you two were the ones who made a proper promise to me when we got divorced, remember? There's even a written agreement. So, what about you?
I don't have any money to give you. And if you're really a doctor, you shouldn't need any money from us. You don't need alimony, do you?
No, this is my rightful entitlement. Don't you remember what you promised when you agreed to pay the alimony? You, an old and useless woman, will have to live alone from now on. So you should gratefully accept the alimony from us and live as modestly as possible, right? Alimony is a hassle, but Richard said he'd pay, so I'll pay at least for the tuition fees. You must be such a cheap, petty woman to be happy with money like this, right? You said all sorts of things back then.
That's because I thought you were just working part-time.
As long as you pay what you promised, I won't have any complaints. Right, Richard? You, as a lawyer, think it's okay to back out of the alimony you agreed to? When I said that with a smile, Richard went completely pale, like a sheet of paper. He seemed to finally realize the gravity of the situation, how it was affecting his professional reputation.
I'll pay. I'll transfer it right after the ceremony, I swear. Please, forgive me. I'm begging you.
Richard bowed deeply, throwing himself into the apology. Megan looked at him with a disappointed expression. Oh, I see. Well, if that's the case, then I'm glad. That's all I wanted to say. So shall we return to the actual ceremony? I handed Megan the shattered pieces of the microphone, which had been slammed onto the floor. With this situation, there was no way the wedding could continue properly. Megan probably understood that. She shot glares that felt like they could kill, but I managed to avoid them as I returned to my seat. As I did so, I whispered to Tom, I'll answer you later. The slight blush on Tom's face made him seem almost endearing, a thought I kept to myself. After that, the wedding somehow reached its conclusion, though the event was a disaster in every sense. As promised, Richard paid the alimony in full, including Megan's share. Now, I couldn't help but wonder why he had hesitated so much when he could pay in one lump sum. I thought I had severed ties with Megan and Richard, so I didn't know anything about what happened next. However, one day I heard Richard's name on the news. It turned out he had used his position as a lawyer to embezzle money. What's worse, when the crime was uncovered, he fled from his office and hit someone with his car during the escape, making matters even worse. As a result, he was disbarred. Since that news aired, Megan's calls never stopped ringing. I'm sure she was calling for help. I blocked her number, but it didn't help, so I switched my phone entirely. It was no longer my problem. Megan, who had thought her life was going smoothly with her marriage to a wealthy man, suddenly fell from grace and became the wife of a criminal. In despair, she apparently tried to take her own life. She survived, but both mentally and physically, she was broken. I heard through rumors that she constantly muttered my name, along with apologies and regrets. Richard received a prison sentence, and his return to practicing law became hopeless. From now on, his life would be nothing but serving his sentence. Despite having a criminal in the family, Tom and the rest of the relatives remained upbeat. Tom and I began dating with the intention of marriage. I was thriving in my career, and I was happy.